You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your PMP certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Risk management is not a one-time checklist. It is a continuous cycle of identify, analyze, plan, implement, and monitor. This cycle runs throughout the project, adjusting as new information arrives and circumstances change. The purpose is not to eliminate all uncertainty, but to understand it and make informed decisions. A project without risk discipline becomes reactive, with surprises driving action instead of deliberate choices. The project manager's stance must be proactive, evidence-seeking, and policy-aligned, ensuring that risks are handled within organizational tolerance. On the exam, stems that describe late discovery, missing owners, or ad hoc reactions are really probing whether you can demonstrate structured risk management instead of improvised firefighting. A clear distinction must be made between a risk and an issue. A risk is an uncertain event that may occur in the future and, if it happens, will affect project objectives positively or negatively. An issue, by contrast, is a problem or opportunity that has already occurred and must be managed as fact. Confusing the two leads to flawed planning. Teams may spend energy managing issues instead of preventing risks, or may ignore emerging risks until they become issues. PMI emphasizes that risk management is about foresight, while issue management is about response. On the exam, watch for wording that distinguishes uncertain versus already occurred. The aim of disciplined risk management is twofold: reduce exposure to threats and increase realization of opportunities. Threats can harm delivery, budgets, or quality, while opportunities can accelerate timelines, improve performance, or reduce costs. A balanced risk approach addresses both sides, rather than treating risk as purely negative. Project managers who recognize opportunities and plan to exploit or enhance them provide more value to sponsors. On the exam, distractors often focus only on threats. Correct answers emphasize the dual nature of risk, both downside protection and upside potential, because project outcomes depend on seizing positive chances as much as avoiding negative surprises. The first major task is identifying risks. Sources are diverse. Technical risks may involve design flaws, integration challenges, or reliance on untested technology. External risks include regulatory changes, vendor instability, or shifts in market demand. Organizational risks can involve shifting priorities, governance weaknesses, or limited resources. Vendor risks emerge from contract performance, delivery reliability, or compliance obligations. Compliance risks cover audits, standards, and legal exposure. Effective identification means casting a wide net without judgment at this stage. PMI emphasizes breadth before filtering. On the exam, distractors that suggest skip categories are misleading. Correct answers emphasize comprehensive identification of technical, external, organizational, vendor, and compliance risks. Techniques for identifying risks include brainstorming, structured checklists, expert interviews, and assumptions analysis. Brainstorming gathers broad perspectives, while checklists based on historical projects ensure common risks are not overlooked. Interviews with subject matter experts reveal domain-specific insights. Reviewing assumptions exposes fragile dependencies that, if invalidated, become risks. For example, assuming vendor delivery times without verification is a potential risk trigger. Each risk should be captured in the risk register in a cause-risk-effect format, such as, if vendor approval is delayed, cause, then system rollout may be late, risk, leading to customer dissatisfaction, effect. This structured wording avoids vague entries. Linking risks to assumptions and dependencies increases rigor. Each assumption that underpins scope, schedule, or cost should be reviewed. What if it proves false? Dependencies on vendors, external approvals, or technology life cycles should be assessed. What if they fail? Risks identified this way are easier to monitor because they have clear triggers. PMI emphasizes that risk identification is not about speculation, but about making uncertainty visible. On the exam, stems about assumption overlooked until it fails highlight missing links. Correct answers emphasize tracing risks back to assumptions and dependencies for clarity and accountability. Once risks are identified, qualitative analysis helps prioritize them. Probability and impact scales, often defined as low, medium, or high, provide a structured way to assess each risk's significance. These scales feed into a probability impact matrix, which visually ranks risks for action. Urgency is another dimension. Some risks require immediate monitoring, while others are distant. Categorization also sharpens analysis. A risk breakdown structure, or RBS, organizes risks into categories such as technical, external, or organizational, making root causes visible. On the exam, distractors that suggest treat all risks equally are incorrect. Correct answers emphasize prioritization based on probability, impact, urgency, and categorization. Prioritization ensures attention is focused where it matters. Not every risk deserves the same level of management effort. Low probability, low impact risks may be logged and monitored lightly, while high probability, high impact risks demand full response plans. Near critical threats, those with medium probability but severe potential impact, should not be ignored. Opportunities are also prioritized. High-value chances to accelerate benefits deserve proactive action. PMI emphasizes that qualitative analysis is iterative, updated as facts change. Risks are not set-and-forget entries. They evolve with the project. On the exam, stems about unchanged register throughout project point to poor practice. Correct answers emphasize regular updates. Root cause analysis deepens qualitative analysis. By exploring why a risk exists, project managers can design more effective responses. For example, a vendor delay risk might stem from weak contract terms or resource shortages. Addressing the root cause through stronger contracts or better capacity planning prevents recurrence. Categorizing risks by root causes also reveals systemic weaknesses. PMI stresses that good risk managers go beyond symptoms to understand underlying drivers. On the exam, distractors that present superficial fixes without cause analysis are incomplete. Correct answers emphasize root cause thinking and structured categorization to prioritize effectively. Planning responses translates analysis into action. Threats can be managed in 4 primary ways. Avoidance means changing the plan to eliminate the risk, such as selecting a proven technology instead of an experimental one. Mitigation reduces probability or impact, like adding redundancy. Transfer shifts responsibility, often through insurance or fixed-price contracts. Acceptance means acknowledging the risk, with active acceptance involving contingency planning and passive acceptance involving simple monitoring. Each choice must be deliberate, not by default. On the exam, distractors that suggest ignore risk are incorrect. Correct answers emphasize one of the formal strategies: avoid, mitigate, transfer, or accept. Opportunities have their own set of strategies. Exploitation ensures the opportunity is realized, such as assigning top talent to capture early delivery. Enhancement increases probability or impact, like providing extra support to accelerate a pilot program. Sharing distributes benefits and responsibilities, often through partnerships. Acceptance acknowledges the opportunity without further action, sometimes due to resource limits. PMI emphasizes that balanced risk management involves planning for both threats and opportunities. On the exam, distractors that ignore opportunities are incomplete. Correct answers emphasize exploit, enhance, share, or accept as formal opportunity strategies. Every risk response plan must define owners, triggers, and budgets or time buffers. Owners ensure accountability for monitoring and acting. Triggers define early warning signs that a risk may materialize, such as a vendor missing intermediate deadlines. Budgets and buffers provide resources so responses are realistic. Without these, risk plans collapse into vague intentions. PMI stresses that risk responses must be resourced. On the exam, STEMs describing "risk identified but no owner or resources" highlight gaps. Correct answers emphasize assigning owners, defining triggers, and allocating resources for each response. Balancing systemic versus local responses improves efficiency. Some risks are systemic, such as recurring quality issues, and require organization-wide changes. Others are local, tied to a specific deliverable or vendor. Over-escalating local risks clogs governance, while ignoring systemic risks undermines organizational learning. The project manager must distinguish between the two and act accordingly. On the exam, distractors that escalate every risk are inefficient. Correct answers emphasize balancing systemic improvements with local actions, ensuring risk management effort matches the scale of exposure. Implementing responses requires follow-through. Plans on paper must be executed, with progress tracked and effectiveness verified. If a mitigation strategy is not reducing probability or impact, it must be adjusted. Monitoring includes tracking residual risks, those that remain after responses, and secondary risks, those created by responses. Escalation pathways ensure risks beyond the project's authority are handed to portfolio or organizational governance. Integration with change control ensures that major risk responses requiring new baselines are approved properly. On the exam, STEMs about responses planned but never implemented highlight weak execution. Correct answers emphasize implementing, monitoring, and adjusting responses. Reporting risk trends and lessons learned ensures ongoing improvement. Tracking whether threats decrease and opportunities increase over time shows whether risk management is working. Lessons learned feed back into organizational knowledge, strengthening checklists and assumptions reviews for future projects. PMI stresses that risk management builds maturity through iteration. On the exam, distractors that suggest close project without updating lessons miss the point. Correct answers emphasize reporting, trending, and documenting lessons so risk management improves continuously. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Expected monetary value, or EMV, is a straightforward way to compare choices under uncertainty. The idea is to multiply the probability of each outcome by its monetary impact, then add those results together to see the average expected cost or gain. For example, if there is a 50% chance of saving $100,000 and a 50% chance of saving nothing, the expected value is $50,000. Another option might guarantee a savings of $40,000. In that case, the first option has a higher expected value, even though it carries more risk. EMV helps project managers make rational choices instead of relying on gut feeling. Decision trees provide a simple picture of EMV calculations. Imagine drawing branches that show possible choices and their outcomes. On each branch, you note the probability and the associated cost or value. Then you calculate the expected value by multiplying the numbers and summing them for each branch. For example, suppose option A has a 70% chance of costing $200,000 and a 30% chance of costing $400,000. Its expected value is $260,000. Option B might have a 100% chance of costing $275,000. Even though option A has more risk, its expected value is lower, making it preferable in expectation. When using EMV, a few guidelines help. Always make sure the units are aligned. Compare either all costs or all values, not a mix. Compute EMV first, then add context such as organizational risk appetite and strategic goals. Remember that a higher expected value is not always the automatic choice if leadership has very low tolerance for uncertainty. Document all assumptions, such as how probabilities were estimated, or where cost figures came from. EMV can also be used to size contingency reserves. For instance, if the expected monetary value of all identified risks totals $100,000, that figure informs how much contingency budget to set aside. Risk rhythms differ in agile and predictive projects. Agile treats risk as a continuous factor within backlog management. Teams often bring forward the riskiest items first, using short experiments called spikes, or tackling uncertain features early to learn quickly. Risks are reviewed frequently in retrospectives and sprint reviews. Predictive projects, in contrast, often schedule risk reviews at phase gates or monthly intervals, using formal registers and reserves to plan responses. Hybrid projects combine both, with agile teams managing risks in cadence, while governance bodies review systemic risks on a set schedule. The principle is the same: keep risk management alive, whether through agile boards or predictive logs. Whichever delivery mode is used, risk artifacts must stay current. In agile environments, backlog items should reflect risk responses, and the definition of done should include any risk-related acceptance steps. In predictive settings, the risk register, response plans, and variance reports must be updated as conditions evolve. Hybrid projects need both backlog discipline for immediate work and registers for governance oversight. Risks are not set once and forgotten. They must evolve as facts change. On the exam, when you see a risk register that never changes during a project, it is a sign of poor practice. The correct action is to keep artifacts fresh. Let's consider a scenario in detail. A vendor delivery is uncertain. If nothing is done, there is a 40% chance of a delay, and that delay would cost $300,000. Option 1 is to spend $50,000 to partially mitigate, reducing the chance of delay to 20%. Option 2 is to spend $100,000 for stronger mitigation, reducing the chance of delay to only 5%. Now let's calculate expected monetary values step by step. With no action, the expected cost is 40% of $300,000, which equals $120,000. For option 1, you start with the mitigation cost of $50,000, then add 20% of $300,000, which is $60,000, giving a total of $110,000. For option 2, you start with $100,000 in mitigation cost, then add 5% of $300,000, which is $15,000, giving a total of $115,000. So in terms of EMV, option 1 is slightly better at $110,000 compared to $115,000 for option 2, but notice the trade-off. Option 2 nearly eliminates the risk of a major delay, even though its expected cost is slightly higher. This is where organizational risk appetite comes in. A company comfortable with some exposure might prefer option 1 to save money on average. A company that values certainty or that operates in a regulated environment where delays are unacceptable might choose option 2. The project manager must present both the math and the context so decision-makers can choose wisely. In heavily regulated projects, compliance considerations often outweigh the raw numbers. Even if the expected monetary value favors a cheaper option, regulatory penalties, reputational risks, or contract violations might make the safer choice mandatory. For instance, a delay that breaches a legal requirement could lead to fines far exceeding the direct project cost. In such cases, the organization might select the higher mitigation option regardless of EMV. The exam often tests this nuance by presenting scenarios where compliance is at stake. The correct answer is to prioritize compliance and alignment with governance, not just the lowest expected cost. Common exam pitfalls in risk management include confusing risks with issues, leaving risks without clear owners or triggers, and rebaselining scope or budget after implementing a risk response without proper approval. Another frequent mistake is ignoring opportunities. Focusing only on threats misses half of the equation. In quantitative analysis, a common error is doing the math without stating assumptions or without keeping units consistent. For example, Mixing cost savings with cost exposures produces misleading results. On the exam, correct answers emphasize ownership, triggers, integration with governance, and transparent assumptions in every calculation. Another trap is overconfidence in static risk registers. Risks evolve, assumptions expire, and organizational tolerance changes over time. If the register is never updated, the project is operating on outdated information. Failing to integrate risk responses into change control is another weakness. For example, if adding mitigation alters schedule or budget, those changes must go through the formal approval path. Ignoring this creates governance gaps. On the exam, answers that suggest implement responses without approval are always incorrect. Correct responses emphasize that risk management must connect to baselines and governance structures. A quick playbook helps anchor risk discipline. Step 1. Keep the risk register alive and review it at regular intervals. Step 2. Qualify risks using probability and impact, then quantify them when necessary with tools like expected monetary value. Step 3. Assign owners and triggers so accountability is clear. Step 4. Implement and verify responses, adjusting if they do not work. Step 5. Communicate risks, responses, and trends clearly to stakeholders, showing how they tie back to value and benefits. The exam rewards answers that echo this rhythm, not shortcuts or one-time reviews. Decision tools like EMV and decision trees add rigor to this playbook. Always state your assumptions, align your units, and calculate in words that are understandable to stakeholders. Then, layer in qualitative factors such as compliance, organizational strategy, and risk appetite. Document the rationale in the risk register and decision log so future audits understand why certain choices were made. PMI stresses that good risk management is about stewardship, protecting resources and credibility by balancing data and judgment. On the exam, distractors that imply gut feeling alone are traps. Correct answers emphasize structured analysis supported by math and context. In conclusion, managing project risks is a continuous cycle of identifying, analyzing, planning responses, implementing, and monitoring. Decision trees and expected monetary value provide simple, voice-friendly ways to compare options and size reserves, but they must always be applied with context. Agile, predictive, and hybrid projects handle risks at different rhythms, but the principles of ownership, triggers, and continuous updates remain the same. Pitfalls include treating risks as issues, skipping governance, or focusing only on threats. Correct answers emphasize structured processes, simple math explained clearly, and rational decisions that protect value and benefits. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.